Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I am a Histio ambassador. I have been for a couple years. I had Langerhans cell histiocytosis when I was an infant, and I currently live in Sarasota, Florida, but I grew up outside of Chicago in Barrington, Illinois, and today I'm interviewing my parents, Steve and Marianne, about their journey with my disease and things that they learned along the way, and getting their very valuable perspective on this entire journey. So, to start, can you just share a little bit about your personal journey with my diagnosis, the first signs, some symptoms, something that, a sign that something wasn't right, and how long it took to receive a diagnosis and what the whole process was like for you?
Yes, it the first signs I would say were appeared when you were maybe 4 or 5 weeks old, and I we were vacationing in Michigan with my family, my parents, and it was my mother actually, because I was a first time mom and I didn't know anything, and she identified she was changing your diaper and noticed that there was blood in the stool. I would not have picked that up because, again, I've never really don't know what it's supposed to look like. In any event, we thought you were healthy. We thought that you were certainly born fine. And you were gaining weight, but as we later discovered, it was really not. It was more water weight. It wasn't really nutrition based. And so we knew something was wrong in your GI tract. We didn't know if it was an allergy. Could have been an allergy to milk, was very common. So we tried different kinds of formulas, and it took probably at least another few weeks before we also started to see some rash on your skin, a strange sort of rash. It was in the course of trying to figure out what was wrong with your skin rash that they discovered histiocytosis. And that was really because we were very fortunate to be very close to a world-renowned hospital that has actually treated this disease. Children's Hospital in Chicago, and seen it many times. And so we brought you up to the specialist in dermatology. And when she was looking at it, she said, you were a textbook case. So she brought in, I remember bringing in a bunch of um, students and residents, and to kind of view what was a very rare form of cancer. Really, we were still battling. The major battle was really with your GI tract, and we didn't honestly didn't know what was the cause for that at the time. They didn't think histiocytosis appeared in the GI tract. They said it was just really rare. And so we remember we went through all sorts of tests, and they still weren't certain, but they did do the diagnosis of the skin and confirmed the disease. And it was only, I think we were in the hospital still going through tests, and the oncologist came to me and she said, she's so sick, we don't even know if we can do a biopsy of her. You do the colonoscopy, I guess, that would allow for the biopsy of your GI tract. And I think eventually they did, but it took a while. And they, in the course of waiting for the results, she said, what are the chances that she has two very unusual forms of the disease? And remember, this is days before the internet. We didn't have access to a lot of information. And so it was really a medical student who was researching this. She was, I think, quite interested in your case, and started researching and came across a case or two of histiocytosis, or LCH, I guess, as we later found out, appearing in the GI tract. So she said, do you want to just go ahead and start treatment before we have an official diagnosis? By that time, you were literally starving because nothing was absorbed in your GI tract. And so I said, yes, go ahead and start start the treatment. It was a steroid treatment, and instantly, almost, it seemed like your skin started clearing up. So we felt pretty good about that. But it was probably, it wasn't until September. So you were about 3 months old. It was several weeks, I would say, at least, before we got the final result.
I just add that what mom said was, this is before you had the information. There was no histiocytosis association, or maybe there was, but it was very small. We had to go to the library and look up books. We had doctors who had to just talk to one another in conferences. Uh, Nothing was computerized; things were on paper. So it took a lot longer, and we're very fortunate just to have the hospital near us, and the fact that we could go to this place quickly, see a lot of people very rapidly and efficiently, and they could speak to one another. We didn't have to go to one hospital for something or a dermatologist somewhere else. So without that, it could have been a much different outcome.
It, it was about 15 months from beginning to end. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's really a lot in a very short amount of time too. What kind of emotions did you experience with all of this, if you even had a second to make sense of any of them?
Besides the initial shock of a rare disease, honestly, it seemed like it took forever to get the diagnosis. So in some ways, it was just sort of a relief that
Yeah.
we knew what it was, and we felt pretty confident of the treatment, and certainly the facilities that we had available to us. I don't remember, I just remember fighting right off the bat, saying, "Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna kill this thing." Back up to when you were first diagnosed. I mean, at that time, I said you were literally starving. We had to. They couldn't even. Your veins were so small. You were so tiny to begin with, and they all the nurses had a really difficult time hooking you up to an IV. They just
They couldn't find the veins. They
couldn't
couldn't.
find
They
the
were too
veins.
small. They had
Exactly.
collapsed or whatever.
Right. So, and I just remember saying, we need to find somebody. You've got to keep looking for. I remember talking to some of the doctors and some of the nurses, and they said, the transport nurses, the ones that fly in the helicopters, in emergency cases, they're the best. So I said,
Mhm.
find me one of those. And then they got it in. They got a vein in it. They found a vein in your head, and
Yep.
they were able to hook up the IV. Really, just in time.
Yeah.
So that was our first crisis, I guess.
But I think mom and I are both pretty driven, I guess, and we were both professionals, had a very busy life, and we just had to be very organized. And I think, again, neither of us was like, oh my gosh, what's happening, blah, blah, blah. I was like, what do we do about it? Just
Yeah.
looking forward, and saying, we've got these resources. And if this person isn't doing something, well, let's find somebody that can. And part of it was the woman who was driving the process was very good as well. She was very driven.
The
And
oncologist, yeah.
yeah, and she's quite a personality. She was extremely good, and that, well, she took us through the entire process. But I think for a lot of people, they'll be shocked, or they can't believe it, or how could this, woe is me. And I think everybody will go through that a little bit. But when I saw other parents, and there a lot of kids were with other types of cancer, and they're doing the same thing. It's just a matter of, you just focus and do it. You got to get the other stuff behind you, or this is not going to be a process that's going to be very easy to get through.
So as this whole journey began, as once you knew what was happening, and once the initial shock had happened, and the initial rush to get the IV in, which that's crazy that where they found the vein was in my head of all places. How did this impact your career, and any sort of dynamic, because you guys both had very busy careers, and obviously there had to be some sort of adjustment, and different ways that you had to adapt and cope to the situation.
Yeah, I mean, again, part of it was insurance. We were on mom's insurance,
Mhm.
and this was a very fast running meter. And And it's now, I can't even imagine what it would be. It would probably be 5x, what, maybe more than what we paid back then.
Yeah.
Or what was paid.
Yeah.
Fortunately, most of it was covered, which
Yeah.
is also changed
Right.
today.
Yeah.
So the whole situation is different. So anyway, mom's an attorney and she was very busy. Her company was paying for the insurance. I was a consultant and I traveled all the time. So after a while, we just decided it made more sense for me to I was able to take time off. So I took a leave of absence, uh, which was great. And fortunately, my employer was extremely accommodating to that. And I was able to just focus on being Dr. Dad. We needed you to get downtown and see you and be with the doctors. And I was a numbers nerd and I used to create spreadsheets and things like that for the doctors to look at for various symptoms and things, which they thought was nerdy but great. And it also kept me busy too. So we were very fortunate in that respect,
Yeah.
that I was able to just be able to stand back and walk away. Not everybody's that way. We saw plenty of people there who it
Well,
was tough.
yeah, especially if you have other children.
Yeah,
You were
Yeah.
our only child at the time, so
rather high
that
maintenance,
would have.
but we'll deal with more.
But I
Yeah.
can't imagine having, younger siblings to tackle, or even older siblings,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
have to try to take care of. So this was, I guess it was fortunate in some ways that it was you as the first one.
Yeah.
yeah. And again, part of it was this was all the Wild West. We didn't know. I mean, we
Yeah.
didn't know our parents, first of all. You might argue we still don't, but it's the the thing was we didn't. You couldn't research. You couldn't just pick up your phone and type in whatever, right?
Yeah.
You had to learn a lot. And I even with the internet and the Histio Association and all the resources it has, a lot of that's kind of vetted down. But you when we picked up a book, first it said basically you weren't going to make it. That's kind of what the book said.
Well,
And if you went by that only, it would freak you out completely. So you have to take that step back, really learn, trust those who understand it and live with it every day. And I think the resources of like the Histio Association and so forth would have been a massive improvement, just to be able to talk with somebody and
Yeah.
have peers experience kind of like the sky isn't falling type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's really, really a blessing that exists more now. Um, so, with all of that, there's a couple things I'm curious about. One, like you said, you were just learning how to be parents, and one would argue you were again learning how to be Dr. Dad and Dr. Mom. So, what were some things that you had no idea about that you had to learn to take care of me during that time?
Well, I think the first thing we had to learn, because your disease was in your GI tract, you couldn't eat. Okay, nothing could really flow through you. You were totally 100% relying on IV nutrition. So that once when you're in the hospital, that's one thing, they can feed you there, but you obviously did come home in between treatments, and but you had every single day to be hooked up to this total parental nutrition, the TPN bag, which is your IV nutrition. So interestingly, we had to learn how to clean out your IV line, and then hook up the, I don't even remember what all was involved, but I do remember we had to add some things to the bag, and we had to clean out your line and then hook you up again, and then you'd have to clean out your line again afterwards. But that was the main thing I learned. Now, Dad actually had something on top of that.
Well, we had a lot of other things, but yeah,
And he
we
too.
had to make sure that the delivery of the medications was proper and that was put into the bag properly and all the other
Hmm.
stuff we used in the refrigerator. You also had a feeding tube,
Yeah,
which was
which
used
is
for not
drainage,
input but output, and
because
so
nothing was coming
yeah,
through. So,
so we had this tube. You had stuff coming out. It was kind of gross, but it
but
was fine.
well, we hooked it up to a bottle to
Yeah,
to collect all of the basically gastrointestinal fluids, I think, basically
Yeah.
that couldn't pass through. But even though you were IV fed, there's still fluids that are secreting in your stomach. So that had to
Yeah.
come out.
Yeah.
And the fluids in the bottle were actually what we used to measure
If you were, yeah, yeah,
the progress that you might
right.
be making. So it went up and down, but
Part of my charting.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then you'd have that feeding tube, and occasionally you just like yank it out and say, "Hey, look what I got here." So
because
I had,
she's an infant.
yeah. So I had to learn how to stick an NG tube in your nose. And I actually taught the nurses at the hospital a couple of times how to do it because you were so little. On the other hand, it was an interesting way to become a parent. We never had to feed you. We never
Yeah.
had to bottle feed you.
Well, we started. We
Yeah, I
did
know we
try
started.
at
Yeah,
the beginning.
obviously, but
We did
for a
try.
long time, you didn't eat. We didn't. You know. So it was kind of weird in that respect. But it wasn't, a good weird. It was just, it was the only thing we knew at the time. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
when your sister came along, she was like, yeah, whatever, kid.
Yeah.
Easy go.
Hannah,
Go shut up and eat. Yeah.
for so many reasons.
Yeah.
Um, so, did you have, with all of this, did you have valuable sources of support, like friends or family? Obviously, maybe medical professionals.
Definitely rely on the medical professionals primarily, but um, we were pretty self sufficient, I guess. We did have neighbors, of course, that would stop in and give us meals or just toys or whatever to help. We incidentally, we actually had some overnight nursing staff for a while because they felt that you were needed to be closely monitored 24
Mhm.
hours for a period of time. So you did have a number of night nurses, which allowed us to get some sleep. But I know my sister came in a number of times. I had a couple sisters come in, but one who drove from Michigan, and she used it as her vacation time away from her family to just come in and sit in the hospital with you. And she's like, "Oh, this is great. I'm just going to bring my book, and I'm just going to be here for Stephanie when she wakes up." And she, yeah, I think I really appreciated that because we didn't really have a lot of family in the immediate area, and
Mhm.
everybody has their own lives. So
But
Yeah.
the hospital was great. I will say that the staff, you mentioned the staff. I think we were very fortunate to have the primary doctor, the oncologist, who was, she was great. She was super well respected by her peers, by her residents. Um, I think she was feared by some, but that is, that's
That's
fine.
usually good. Yeah.
Yeah,
she had kind of a scary appearance,
yeah.
actually,
But she was
but she
fantastic.
but
But
she was brilliant,
yeah,
just brilliant.
and we didn't. She could have been weird. I didn't care if she was super weird, but she was, when we'd speak with her, she was very much on point. She was very factual. She was very quick, and she was clearly in this to win it.
Yeah.
She was not going to just say, "Well, I'll try this, and I got somewhere else to go."
Yeah.
Uh, so that was,
Very
I
committed.
think, yeah, the
Very
commitment.
committed.
That's the word I'm looking for. And she was for years. So I think you ran into her at least 15 years later somewhere.
Mhm.
That's right. I do remember that,
Yeah.
actually. That was kind of surreal, running into her after
Yeah.
all of that.
But I will. So mom and I was just kind of on that support thing. We, you know, because we had some, but not a lot of support. There, I remember we went to a meeting after you'd sort of gotten over the hump.
Mhm.
There was a histio meeting in Florida, in Orlando. This was probably in 90 something, six, seven. And we decided we would go just as people who had kind of been through the war. And uh, it was interesting to see people just coming into it, how many people just wanted to talk, and how many people really were just searching for some sort of connection to others as part of the association. So I thought, that was really, really great. And again, the internet was just coming in then. They were writing down, names and addresses. I think I helped worked with some guy to start the original um, directory for the website back in the late 90s. So, again, I think everybody's different, but the having the association there and just the connection to others, the easy and quick connections to others, has been a real game changer for a lot of people. And we've gotten calls over the years. Remember, we get calls out of the blue,
Mm-hmm.
just from people saying, hey, I got your name from so and so and wanted to talk to you about your experience, either with the GI tract or whatever symptoms, or the hospital.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like so cool to see where that all started, and I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time, so I think that's really incredible. And
Yeah, it's been a long time. I guess we both had to sort of search the memory banks of it,
yeah,
trying to understand this stuff.
yeah. You obviously mentioned a few challenges at the beginning. Were there a couple moments during this time, during my treatment, that really stand out to you as particularly challenging?
Yeah, there were. I've shared these, with you a few times. Of course, going through the chemo treatment, you pretty on a regular basis. Once you've received the chemo, it's usually about a week later. The fever spikes, and you just automatically are go down to the hospital. They want to admit you because they want to watch for infections. So you were admitted many times in the course of your treatments. Um, and one of those times I do recall you were still, of course, being fed via um, the IV nutrition and the TPN bag, same kind of bag that we used at home. Um, and during that one visit, we came in the next morning, early the next morning, and we found you, or the nurse, I think, we found you hooked up to oxygen. Basically, we something had happened, and it's where you were just stiff as a board. The nurses were saying, we don't know what happened. She's just stiff as a board. And for whatever reason, I guess that they did call the oncologist, who was like, basically they knew she could be contacted at any time, any day, any day, any time of day, day or night. And
Yeah,
so she was contacted, and she said, I want round the clock care for her. I wanted somebody to be checking on her constantly. Well, we couldn't figure out exactly what happened, but what they suspected was some sort of chemical imbalance in the IV bag. And if you are given too much potassium, if they just didn't measure it properly, it can cause your calcium levels to lower dramatically, and that is what causes the stiffness and apparently also affects your oxygen. I don't know. But in any event, I just remember seeing you, and they were saying, I don't know what, something, this might have been off. And I just saw the bag, the TPN bag in the trash can.
mm,
And I said, are you going to test this? And the nurse picked it up and said, oh, yeah, we'll take it down and get it tested. And
yeah,
as it turns out, it was just human error. Just
yeah,
one of those things that, it had nothing to do with the actual chemo treatment. It just, sometimes things happen, and
yeah,
somebody in the lab just measured it incorrectly.
Yeah, it
yeah,
was kind of an insult to injury kind of thing,
yeah,
Here you are, 8 pounds or 10 pounds or something, and they're messing it up, and like, oh,
yeah,
you talked about milestones, and I guess there's always it's every Sunday night after your chemo, I basically knew you would wake up crying at about 11 o'clock. I'd have to get in the car, drive down to the hospital, and stay up all night, but it's just the way it was. You were like clockwork, but I remember a lot of good milestones too, right? So you couldn't eat, you couldn't drink. And I remember, there were great milestones. Like there was the 4th of July, we were in Michigan, and you suddenly ate, like literally ate 3 tablespoons of something and didn't throw it up all over me. So that was fantastic. When we were trying to put slight amount of stuff into your stomach via the feeding tube, and it didn't, and it actually made its way through. That was fantastic. So again, these are just little tiny things. I mean, for some people, having the kid eat 3 spoons, whatever, but for us, that was a huge milestone.
yeah,
Having you just take a bottle, you didn't know how to suck
Didn't
on
how
a
to
bottle.
suck.
You didn't know how
No,
to eat.
we had no sucking mechanism. You actually had to teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
We had to get a speech therapist actually
Yeah.
to help us learn you teach you how to how to eat is the process of
Yeah.
sucking and I mean
Wow. That's crazy.
So there were a lot of things like that. It was, there was the really kind of messy time for months, a few months, whatever, however months it was, 6, 8 months or something.
mhm.
But then there was the not so messy time where you're kind of like, you're not out of the woods, but at least you can see the end, right? You can see
Yeah.
you're going in the right direction. You may have to cross a few streams and climb over some stuff, but you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of little milestones. I think
Well, you
this
just
wasn't like a lot of diseases like this. It's not something that you just like you're done.
Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, I mentioned the bottle, the fluids that are flowing through
Mm-hmm.
her NG tube into the bottle. If we went for they initially it would just be, and usually right after chemo, I think that was part of it, but it would be like a full bottle. And then as things got better, months later, we were watching it where the fluid was just this much, or it went
Yeah,
down. It was like, oh, it was empty today.
Yeah.
So, I
yeah,
mean, you just knew something, and it was up and down a bit, but when it was empty for a couple days or 2 or 3 days, I mean, it was, yeah, we were so happy.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, after going through all that, that's absolutely the littlest things are so
Mhm.
exciting. And,
Yeah. Well, you did the hard part. We were just kind of there along for the ride.
I would argue you did the hard part.
Yeah,
The bag thing really doesn't sound fun. So sorry about that. The GI stuff.
Oh, the TPN thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fine. That
But
was really nothing, but
makes me very grateful I function normally in that way now.
yeah,
we didn't make any major mistakes in the
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Certainly this had to influence some sort of perspective on parenting. I mean, like you said, you were new parents anyway. Are there any thoughts that come to your mind just about your perspective on being a parent in general after that happened?
I really don't know how to answer that because obviously you were very unique. You were our first child
Hmm.
and not a typical way to parent. So I was very, as I say, I was very grateful that I didn't have another child to take care of at the same time.
Yeah.
I think obviously with Hannah, our second, came along, that was like my first experience parenting in some ways. I mean, I felt like yours was so unusual.
You think about it, it wasn't just us. It was us. It was all the doctors and the nurses and the
Right.
residents and the people who came to our houses, the traveling nurses and the technology people who would bring all the
Hmm.
IV stuff. We had a little hospital room set up there,
Yep.
all the monitors. And it was just different. I don't know. It wasn't different for us because it was the only thing we knew.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We were kind of looking forward to being normal parents with Hannah
Yeah.
or having a normal kid, unlike you. So,
Yeah. Well, like I said, that kind of continued even after
yeah,
more normal. So,
still high maintenance. And
yeah. Well, you know, is there any advice that you would give to a parent that might have received a similar diagnosis for their child? I know every situation, especially like this, is unique, but if someone were to ask you, right now, you know, what do I do? Where do I start? What are a couple things that you would tell them?
I'd say first, take a deep breath and get through the freak out period. Oh my gosh, right? And yeah, things are going to be different. Just face it. It's not going to be a straightforward process. There, histio comes at incredibly varying degrees. I think yours was pretty involved, and I honestly don't know what the whole strata is. Right? It could be very tight, but I think there's some that's treated with just steroids and I can't remember
Well,
some it's
surgery, you might have surgery.
surgery,
I don't. I
right, right.
think I don't.
But I would say the first thing I would do is learn and
Mhm.
take time to talk to people who various parties. First, I would do research online. I'd go to the Histio Association first of all and find out what they've got because it's going to be the latest and greatest. I would talk to others, but I would be very careful about that because your situation is not their situation, either
Yeah.
personally, professionally, or medically. You could hear a lot of things that could freak you out, or a lot of things that could maybe minimize what you're going to go through. Yeah, I think that you've got to work with the doctors and trust them.
Well, I do think I'll talk about that. Trust them, but you also have to be your own
Advocate,
advocate.
yeah,
You
Hmm.
really need to make sure that you are
yeah,
up to speed on what they're saying and what they're proposing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to just keep it amongst themselves. I think our doctor was pretty open with us,
yeah.
but it's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think, just like the situation with the IV bag in the hospital room that was, that had the improper balance of nutrients. You got to stay on top of this, see what is going on, and try to help them find a solution if you can. But it's really just important to be your own advocate, and to if I hadn't, pushed to find that transport nurse or gone ahead and talked to the oncologist and said, yes, please proceed with the treatment because I'm sure that's what this is. We can't afford to wait for a diagnosis.
Yeah.
You've got to take matters into your own hands at certain times and just certainly trust the doctors. Certainly don't ignore their advice, but I'm just saying make sure you're taking that into account and being part of the process and being informed of
Hmm.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add something now, which is much more current than it was when we were there. This was certainly an issue we had to deal with, but it's all the insurance stuff. Uh, the insurance stuff is a gigantic pain in the butt. They are not your friend. They are there to not there
Deny
necessarily to
claims.
help you.
Yeah.
They are there to make money.
Yeah.
And if you look at many major city centers, the insurance companies are the big buildings. They didn't get there by paying out claims. So
Yeah.
you have to be aggressive with them. You have to understand how they work, and you have to understand what you deserve and what is right in these cases. Your doctor may not be aggressive enough. They may not be somebody who will fight the insurance because they'll say, well, they're just not going to cover it. Well,
Right.
then you got to do something about that. And neither mom nor I are terribly meek. So, especially when your kid is concerned, and, we go after them.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it again, the meter runs exceptionally fast now. You got to figure out a way to make it so that your insurance, whatever it is giving you the best you can get, your child the
Exactly.
best they can get.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's going to be a frustrating process. I can't even imagine going through this now, what it would be like.
Yeah.
Uh, they all want to have it as a cookie cutter, right? They'll say, well, she's got, if you had leukemia or if you had something else, they say, well, these are the things you go through. This is our standard of care. Outside of that, we'll talk to you about it. There's no standard of care. They didn't even know what it was.
At that time, they
Yeah,
didn't. They had no schedules. They didn't
right.
have, and in our situation, they were appointed a case manager from the insurance company because who I could work with directly,
Hmm.
and just because they didn't really know what was appropriate. But
Right.
um, I do the insurance rules were all different then,
Yeah,
and thankfully they're not the same today in terms of requiring approval by your
yeah,
primary care physician. Literally every single expenditure, whether it was admitting,
yeah. It was
to the
crazy.
hospital or an appointment or whatever, it had to be approved by your primary care physician, which is ludicrous because they
Yeah,
Yeah.
have absolutely no idea they're not trained in the
yeah,
specialty, so they
Yeah.
have no idea. And that's why the rules
yeah.
changed. But that things like that where you just you keep trying to push the limits and if it doesn't make sense, then you try to argue with it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's really good advice. And, unfortunately, against something people are going to face today as well maybe
Yeah.
for different reasons. But, on the advice note, is there word or a message that, to close this out, that you can leave everyone with?
Yeah, I think the main thing to remember is, especially when you're dealing with children and infants in particular, but certainly children are very resilient. It's amazing how they can get through this process with such a positive attitude. They just don't carry sort of the burdens of many adults in terms of worrying and remembering and just belaboring all of the pain. They just forget. They don't even think about the pain. They'll go through it one moment. When I mentioned this incident in the hospital where my sister was coming to visit, and she was just with you, and she brought this big stuffed toy, and she was just playing with you, and you were laughing and giggling, and then the next second you were throwing up. and um, and then she said you cleaned it up, and then you were laughing again. You were just playing with a toy. It just, it's just, that's one of the reasons. It's funny because the pediatrician said, you know what, that's why I'm a pediatrician, a pediatric oncologist. Just love dealing with children. And I know this is primarily a children's disease. I know it does occur in adults, but um, it is, I think, most often found in children. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I'd say just remember. I mean, they'll get through it.
Yeah, and I would say on the other side, and again, you've got to be your own advocate. You are going to have to work at this. This isn't something you can just. I know people may have 5 kids and they have this. They may have, 2 jobs. I have no idea what their personal situation is, but it is going to be something that's going to be very time or all consuming. And life changed, right? That's just the way it is. It may be something that will be for a month, 6 months, 2 years, or in some cases, the lingering aspects for a long time or forever. So you just have to kind of face that, and I think take a step back. And like a lot of things in life, it's maybe not the path that you chose, but it's the one you're on, and you just got to kind of deal with it. And there are others. And the other thing is now there are a lot of people you can call on around you,
Mhm.
right? I mean, everybody's personal situation is different, but you aren't alone. And, you may have a spouse, you may have friends, family, the association, whatever, and you'll meet a lot of new people when you're going through this type of thing. And it's all, that's a very good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking with me through this, and
Sure.
hopefully this will be helpful and meaningful to somebody else.
Yeah, I hope so too.
It's our pleasure,
Yeah.
and we feel very lucky that we had this very special experience with you.
Yeah.